I am Mike Larson, 36 years old, working on the 20th floor of a gleaming tech building in Ann Arbor, Michigan, with large glass windows overlooking the bustling streets below. I am the technical director of a software company earning over $400,000 a year. That's a figure I never dared to dream of as a kid. But if you ask me what I'm most proud of, I wouldn't talk about money. I'd talk about my mother, Diane Larson, the strong woman who raised me in a small house in Detroit where the smell of machine oil and the sound of factory whistles were part of my childhood. I grew up in a middle-class family where my parents worked tirelessly at an auto factory. My father, a quiet but warm man, passed away 2 years ago from heart disease. That loss left my mother, who had always relied on him, quieter than before. She lives alone in the old house in Detroit, where everything remains as it was when I was a kid. The worn fabric of the sofa, the slightly crooked family photo on the wall, and the smell of cookies she bakes every weekend. I try to provide for her, sending money and buying new appliances, but she always brushes it off, saying she only needs me to be healthy and happy. That's my mom, always putting me first, never asking for anything for herself. My life changed when I married Claire Wentworth, the daughter of the Wentworth family, a name everyone in Michigan knows. They are an aristocratic family owning a string of real estate from luxury hotels to lakeside resorts. Claire, 34 years old, is a smart, charming woman, but sometimes I sense a conflict within her. She loves me, I believe that, but she's also caught between me and her family, especially her mother, Evelyn Wentworth. Evelyn is the kind of person who makes you feel small with just a glance. At 65, she still carries the elegance of a queen, with meticulously styled silver hair and expensive dresses. She constantly talks about class and family honor as if they're the only things that matter in life. To her, people like my mother, a retired factory worker, are mere shadows in her world. I've never heard Evelyn say anything directly offensive about my mom, but the way she smiles, the way she asks about her with that falsely sweet tone, always makes me uneasy. Once she called my mom a lovely, simple woman, but her eyes told a completely different story. Claire knows her mother is like this, but she rarely speaks up. "That's just how Mom is, don't take it to heart," she often says, then changes the subject. I try to let it go because I love Claire, and I think I can tolerate Evelyn to keep the peace. But deep down, I'm always afraid that one day Evelyn's arrogance will push me to my limit. It all started on a Friday evening when I came home after a long day at the company. Our apartment is in downtown Ann Arbor, a modern place with minimalist furniture and a view of the Huron River. Claire was sitting on the sofa scrolling through her phone when she looked up and said with an excited tone, "Mike, Mom wants you to organize her birthday party, her 65th. It has to be spectacular." I frowned, setting my coffee cup on the table. "Organize a party? You mean I'm doing it all myself?" Claire smiled, stood up, and wrapped her arms around my neck. "You're great at organizing, Mike. Mom trusts you'll do it well. Besides, you know she likes everything to be perfect." I sighed. It's not that I didn't want to, but the thought of pleasing Evelyn exhausted me. Still, I nodded. "All right, I'll do it, but I need your help, Claire." She nodded, but I knew she wouldn't be much involved. Claire always leaves me to handle things related to her family, as if she wants to keep a distance between me and the trouble her mother brings. I got to work the following week. I chose the Grand Oak Hotel, a 5-star venue in downtown Ann Arbor with a lavish banquet hall and a view of the park. I hired an event company for decorations, ordered imported flowers from the Netherlands, and selected a menu featuring lobster, Wagyu beef, and French wine. I even contacted a renowned jazz band from Chicago to perform live. The total estimated cost was over $50,000, mostly from my personal account. I didn't complain. I have the money, and I wanted to do this for Claire, for the family. During a family gathering, Evelyn unexpectedly suggested, "Mike, I'd like to invite your mother, Diane, to the party. It would be meaningful to have the whole family together, don't you think?" I was stunned, almost unable to believe my ears. Evelyn had never invited my mother to any Wentworth family events. I looked at Claire, who gave a slight smile as if agreeing with her mother. In that moment, I felt a spark of hope. Maybe Evelyn was trying to change. Maybe this was a chance for my mother to be respected, for our families to truly come together. I called my mom that evening. Her voice over the phone was as warm as always, but I sensed hesitation when I mentioned the party. "Son, I'm not used to fancy places," she said, chuckling softly. "I'm afraid I'll feel out of place." "Mom, I want you there," I said firmly. "This is a chance for you to meet Claire's family, and I'll be with you. Don't worry." In the end, she agreed, though I knew she was only doing it for me. I pictured her in a new dress I'd buy for her, standing in the grand banquet hall, smiling with pride. I wanted her to see that I'd succeeded, that I'd never forgotten her sacrifices. But deep down, a sense of unease crept in. Was Evelyn truly inviting my mother out of sincerity, or was it just to prove something? The following days, I threw myself into preparations. I checked every detail, from the table arrangements to the lighting in the hall. I wanted everything to be perfect, not just for Evelyn, but for my mother. I wanted her to feel like she belonged, even if just for one night. The night before the party, I drove to Detroit to pick up my mom. Her small house was the same as always, with its weathered wooden fence and the little garden she tended. She stepped out, wearing an old sweater, her hair neatly tied back. "You didn't have to pick me up," she said, but her eyes lit up when she saw me. "I want to make sure you get there on time," I said with a smile, opening the car door for her. On the drive back to Ann Arbor, she talked about her days at the factory, her old friends, and my dad. I listened, feeling my heart warm. My mother is the strongest woman I know, and I'd do anything to protect her. When we arrived at the Grand Oak Hotel, she looked up at the magnificent building with awe. "My goodness, Mike, this place is like something out of a movie," she whispered. I took her hand, smiling. "You deserve to be here, Mom. Tonight will be wonderful, you'll see." But as I led her into the banquet hall, where staff were bustling with final preparations, I couldn't shake the unease. Evelyn's gaze, her tone, her artificial smile, they all felt like a warning that things wouldn't be as simple as I hoped. 30 minutes before the party began, I stood in a corner of the banquet hall, overseeing everything, my eyes scanning the growing crowd. Tuxedos and glittering evening gowns shimmered under the crystal chandeliers, laughter mingling with the soft jazz melodies from the band. Everything was perfect, just as I had planned. But my heart was beating faster than usual, not from exhaustion, but from an inexplicable premonition. I glanced at my mother, who stood near the buffet table, clutching her small purse, a slightly forced smile on her lips. I told myself, "It'll be fine, Mike. Mom will be okay." Preparing for this party hadn't been easy. For the past 2 weeks, I'd barely slept. I worked all day at the company, then spent evenings checking every detail, from the guest list to the floral arrangements on the tables. Evelyn wanted an elegant event, and I knew if there was even the slightest mistake, she wouldn't hesitate to criticize. Claire helped a little, mostly offering opinions on the menu and choosing decor colors, but the bulk of the work fell on my shoulders. I didn't complain. I'm used to pressure. But whenever I thought of my mom, I felt a fiercer motivation. I wanted her to see what I'd accomplished, and I wanted her to feel the respect she deserved. That morning, I took my mom to a boutique in Ann Arbor to pick out a dress. She initially refused, saying she could wear an old outfit, but I insisted. "Mom, tonight you're going to be the star," I said, half joking, half serious. In the end, she chose a navy blue dress, simple but elegant, that complemented her petite frame. When she stepped out of the fitting room, I almost didn't recognize her. Not because of the expensive dress, but because her eyes sparkled, as if she'd rediscovered a confidence long buried. I took her hand and said softly, "You look beautiful, Mom." She smiled, but I could tell she was still nervous, like a child about to step into an unfamiliar world. Now, as the party began, I tried to keep everything under control. I moved from table to table, shaking hands with guests, business people, lawyers, and the Wentworth's high society friends. They smiled politely, asked about my work, but I sensed curiosity in their eyes. To them, I was the Wentworth's son-in-law, a man from humble roots who'd been lucky enough to marry Claire. I didn't mind. I was used to those looks. Evelyn made her entrance like a queen, gliding into the hall in a pale yellow silk dress, a shimmering shawl draped lightly over her shoulders. The crowd parted to make way, and applause erupted. She smiled, nodding to each person as if this were her personal coronation. Claire walked beside her, radiant in a red dress, but I could tell she was tense. She glanced at me, gave a brief smile, then turned back to chatting with guests. I escorted my mom to the family's assigned table. As I pulled out her chair, I noticed something odd. Her seat was at the corner of the table near the service area where staff moved in and out constantly. Meanwhile, Evelyn and her closest friends sat at the center under the brightest lights. I frowned, a wave of unease rising, but I told myself it was probably just an oversight. I sat next to my mom, trying to make her feel at ease. "How's it going, Mom?" I asked gently. She looked around, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Everything. It's so beautiful, Mike. I've never been somewhere like this." She smiled, but I saw the awkwardness in her eyes. I took her hand under the table, giving it a reassuring squeeze. "Just relax, Mom. I'm right here with you." The party went smoothly for the first hour. The appetizers were served, the aroma of grilled lobster filled the air, and red wine gleamed in the glasses. I started to relax, thinking I'd been worrying too much. But then, as the band took a break and Evelyn stood to give a speech, everything changed. She took the microphone, her voice ringing out, smooth and commanding. "Thank you all for being here to celebrate my 65th birthday," she began, her smile radiant. The crowd applauded, and I clapped too, though I remained wary. She went on, thanking her family, friends, and speaking of Claire with obvious pride. Then, unexpectedly, she looked toward my mother. "I also want to thank someone special tonight," she said, her tone syrupy. "Mrs. Diane Larson, Mike's mother, who joined us here. It's wonderful to have humble people like Diane to remind us of modesty." A few chuckles rose from the crowd. I felt the blood rush to my face. Humble? Modesty? In Evelyn's tone, those words weren't compliments. They were veiled daggers wrapped in a sugary coating. I looked at my mom. Her head was lowered, her hands gripping each other tightly. The smile on her face was gone. I wanted to stand up to say something, but I held back. "Don't make a scene, Mike," I told myself. "Mom's fine, it's just a comment." But deep down, I knew it wasn't just a comment. It was Evelyn asserting her dominance, putting my mother down to elevate herself. The party continued, but the atmosphere had shifted for me. I noticed every detail. The way Evelyn chatted with guests, the way she glanced at my mother with a smirk, the way she deliberately lingered on stories about the Wentworths' wealth and prestige. Each word from her was like a drop of water filling a glass to the brim, and I felt anger smoldering in my chest. Things got worse when one of Evelyn's friends, a middle-aged woman with sleek blonde hair, turned to my mom and asked, "Mrs. Diane, I heard you used to work at an auto factory, is that right?" That must have been fascinating. My mom, shy in front of crowds, gave a strained smile. "Yes, I worked on the assembly line. It was hard work, but it was okay." Before she could say more, Evelyn cut in, her tone cheerful but sharp. "Oh, Diane worked on the assembly line, didn't she? How admirable. But I bet she never dreamed of a place like this before Mike married Claire." The table erupted in laughter, as if it were the funniest thing they'd ever heard. I looked at my mom and my heart shattered. Her eyes were glistening with unshed tears, her hands trembling in her lap. She tried to smile, but I knew she was hiding her humiliation. In that moment, I realized I'd made a mistake bringing her here. I'd been naive to believe Evelyn wanted to bring the family together. This wasn't a party to honor my mother. It was Evelyn's stage, and my mother was just a prop to showcase her superiority. I gripped my water glass, my knuckles turning white. Claire, sitting a few seats away, looked at me with worried eyes, but she said nothing. I wanted to shout, to slam the table, but I knew doing so would only embarrass my mom further. I clenched my jaw, trying to stay calm, but in my mind a plan was forming. I wouldn't let my mother be humiliated like this. Never again. The party went on, but for me everything had changed. I started counting the seconds, waiting for an opportunity to act. I didn't know exactly what I'd do, but I knew one thing. Evelyn had gone too far, and I would make her pay. After the light appetizers, the main courses began to be served, the aroma of grilled Wagyu beef and French wine filling the hall. But I no longer had the appetite to enjoy it. I glanced at Claire, hoping she would do something. A reproachful look at her mother, a word in defense of my mom. But she just sat there, offering a strained smile to a guest beside her. I knew Claire didn't want to cause tension, but her silence in that moment felt like a confirmation. She was choosing her mother's side, not mine. Meanwhile, Evelyn continued to reign like a queen on her throne, effortlessly steering the atmosphere. I tried to focus on my mom, wanting to make her feel more at ease. "Mom, this dish is delicious, give it a try," I said, pushing the lobster plate toward her. She nodded, picking up her fork, but I noticed her hand trembling slightly. "I'm not that hungry, son," she whispered, her voice so soft I had to lean in to hear. I wanted to say something to comfort her, but the words stuck in my throat. I just took her hand under the table, squeezing it gently, hoping she could feel that I was there, that I wouldn't let her face this alone. But things got worse. Another woman, a friend of Evelyn's seated across from my mom, struck up a new conversation. "Mrs. Diane, I heard you live in Detroit? That area must be interesting, right?" Her tone was sweet, but I caught the false curiosity in it. I clenched my jaw, sensing they were deliberately digging into my mom's past for their amusement. My mom gave a faint smile. "Yes, I've lived there my whole life. It's a normal neighborhood, but I like the quiet." Evelyn, standing nearby, immediately jumped in, her voice cheerful but sharp as a blade. "Oh, quiet is right. I bet Diane never imagined she'd be sitting in a place like this, did she? Lucky for her that Mike married Claire, isn't that right, everyone?" The table erupted in laughter, louder this time. A few people nodded as if Evelyn's comment was an undeniable truth. I looked at my mom, and that moment hit me like a hammer to the chest. Tears began streaming down her cheeks onto the table, her lips pressed tightly to suppress her emotions. She lowered her head as if wanting to disappear from everyone's gaze. I felt the blood rush to my head, my ears ringing. Enough. I couldn't take it anymore. I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping loudly against the wooden floor. All eyes turned to me, but I didn't care. I only saw my mom, the hurt in her eyes, and I knew I had to do something. "Mom," I said, my voice trembling but resolute, "we're leaving." She looked at me, surprised, but I didn't give her time to protest. I offered my hand, helping her stand. "If my mother isn't respected here," I said, my voice ringing out in the now silent hall, "then she doesn't need to stay, and neither do I." The room seemed to freeze. The whispers stopped. The clinking of cutlery against plates vanished. Evelyn stood there, microphone still in hand, her mouth open but speechless. Claire looked at me, her eyes filled with panic, but she still said nothing. I didn't wait for her to speak. I took my mom's hand, leading her through the crowd, past the stunned stares and curious glances. Each step I took was a declaration. I wouldn't let my mother be humiliated for another second. When we reached the hallway, my mom gripped my hand tighter. "Mike, you didn't have to do that," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "I didn't want you to fight with Claire's family." I stopped, looking directly into her eyes. "Mom, I'm not fighting, I'm doing what's right. You deserve respect, and I won't let anyone belittle you." She didn't say anything, just nodded, but tears continued to roll down her cheeks. I hugged her, feeling her small frame tremble in my arms. In that moment, I realized how naive I'd been. I'd thought bringing her here would be a way to unite our families, but I was wrong. Evelyn didn't want my mom here to belong. She wanted her here to serve as a backdrop for her own arrogance. I led my mom to the car, opening the door for her to get in. On the drive back to Detroit, the air in the car was heavy. My mom was silent, staring out the window, and I knew she was trying to hide her pain. "Mom, I'm sorry," I said, my voice hoarse. "I shouldn't have let you come." She turned to me, placing a hand on my shoulder. "Don't apologize, Mike. You made me proud. You've always protected me, just like your father did." Her words were like a balm, but they didn't soothe the anger inside me. I thought about Evelyn, her fake smile, the way she turned my mom into a laughingstock in front of the crowd. I thought about Claire, her silence. And then a thought flashed in my mind, sharp, resolute, and unstoppable. I wouldn't let this end here. When I brought my mom back to her house, I helped her inside, gently placing her small purse on the worn dining table. The little house in Detroit was as it always was, with the familiar smell of wood and the ticking of the clock on the wall. My mom sat down on the sofa, her hands clasped tightly, her eyes still carrying the sadness from the party. I knelt in front of her, taking her hands. "Mom, I'm so sorry for letting you go through this," I said, my voice choked. She shook her head, giving a faint smile. "Mike, don't blame yourself. I'm just worried about you. Standing up to Claire's family like that, I'm afraid things will get complicated." I squeezed her hands, feeling the warmth of her frail fingers. "Mom, I won't let anyone hurt you. Never again." I stood up, pulling a chair closer, deciding that tonight I'd stay here with her. I didn't want to leave her alone, not after what had just happened. My mom stood, saying she'd make tea, but I stopped her. "Mom, sit down, let me do it." I went to the kitchen, boiled water, and took out 2 of her favorite old mugs. While waiting for the water to heat, I looked around the small kitchen, once filled with the laughter of my parents and me. Those memories reminded me that my mom was the most important person in my life, and I'd been wrong to try fitting into Evelyn's world. When I brought the tea out, my mom seemed more relaxed, but her eyes were still full of concern. "What are you going to do next, Mike?" she asked, her voice soft but caring. "I know you're angry, but don't do anything rash, okay?" I sat down beside her, placing the tea on the table. Inside, my anger still simmered, but now it had transformed into a cold determination. I pulled out my phone, looking at my mom. "Mom, I need to do something. Not for revenge, but to protect our dignity." She frowned, but didn't stop me. I took a deep breath and dialed the manager of the Grand Oak Hotel. "This is Mike Larson," I said, my voice calm but icy. "I'm requesting that all unpaid services for tonight's party be stopped immediately. The band, the singers, the MC, and all remaining services, halt them now. I won't be covering any further invoices." The manager was stunned, his voice trembling over the phone. "Mr. Larson, but the party is ongoing. If we stop the services, we'll have to inform Mrs. Wentworth." "The contracts are all in my name," I cut him off, my eyes still on my mom for reassurance. "I have the authority to decide. If Mrs. Wentworth wants to continue, she'll have to pay for it herself. Do it now." When the call ended, I set the phone down, feeling as if a weight had been lifted. I knew this action was tantamount to declaring war on my wife's family, but I was ready for the worst. If my mother-in-law wanted to salvage her party, she'd have to pay for it herself, something I doubted she could do given the rumors about the Wentworth family's financial troubles. My mom looked at me, her eyes a mix of worry and pride. "Are you sure about this, Mike?" she asked. I nodded, taking her hand. "I've never been more sure, Mom. I won't let them think they can humiliate you without consequences." Just 15 minutes later, my phone began buzzing incessantly. Messages from Claire, from Evelyn, and even unknown numbers, likely guests or event staff. I didn't open them. Instead, I silenced the phone, set it aside, and turned to my mom. "Mom, I'm staying here tonight. Let's have tea, talk like we used to, okay?" She smiled, this time a genuine smile. "All right, son. I'll get the cookies." We sat there in the dim light of the living room, sipping tea and talking about old times. About Dad, about camping trips, about my mom's simple dreams. Each story was like a balm soothing my heart. but deep inside I knew I'd crossed a line from which there was no turning back. My actions would have consequences, and I was ready to face them. For my mom and for my own self-respect, I had no regrets. Not a single one. The next morning, I woke up on the sofa in my mom's small house in Detroit. Early sunlight slipped through the curtains, illuminating the worn wooden floor. My mom had been up for a while. I could hear her clattering in the kitchen, the faint aroma of coffee in the air. Last night, after cups of tea and old stories, I'd fallen asleep, feeling a mix of relief and tension about what lay ahead. I knew my decision to halt the services at Evelyn's party wouldn't go unnoticed. My phone, though silenced, was likely flooded with messages and calls from Claire, Evelyn, and probably others. But I wasn't ready to face them. Not yet. I sat up, stretched, and walked into the kitchen. My mom was frying eggs, turning to smile when she saw me. "Did you sleep well?" she asked, her voice as gentle as always. "Enough to handle today," I replied, forcing a smile. I sat at the table eating breakfast with her, but my mind was elsewhere. I thought about Claire, about Evelyn, and about what I'd done. I didn't regret it, but I knew I'd ignited a conflict whose outcome I couldn't yet predict. After saying goodbye to my mom, promising to return soon, I drove back to Ann Arbor. The familiar road now felt different, as if I were heading into battle. When I reached the company, the gleaming glass building loomed before me. I took a deep breath and stepped inside. I was the technical director. This was my domain, but today I felt like a stranger. As I opened my office door, I froze. Claire and Evelyn were already there, seated in the guest chairs, their icy gazes fixed on me. The air in the room was thick, as if a storm was about to break. "Mike," Claire spoke first, her voice trembling but tense. "Do you have any idea what you've done? You ruined everything." I closed the door, walked to my desk, and forced myself to stay calm. "Good morning to you both," I said evenly. "I assume you're here about last night." Evelyn shot to her feet, pointing at me. "You ungrateful wretch," she roared, her voice sharp as a blade. "Who do you think you are, sabotaging my party? You married Claire, benefited from our family, and this is how you repay us? A factory boy like you should be grateful." Her words hit like a punch, but I didn't flinch. I met her gaze, my voice cold. "Evelyn, I didn't need your wealth to succeed, and I certainly don't need you humiliating my mother to feel important." Claire stood, stepping closer to me, her eyes full of disappointment. "Mike, you don't understand," she said, her voice almost pleading. "When you stopped the services, everything fell apart. The band left mid-performance, the staff stopped working, and Mom was left standing there in front of hundreds of guests with no idea how to continue. Do you know how humiliating that was? Guests were whispering, leaving, and now the whole city is talking about how our family couldn't afford to pay." I looked at Claire, my heart aching. I loved her, but my anger was stronger. "Claire, did you see how my mom was treated?" I asked, my voice low but sharp. "She was turned into a laughingstock by your mother in front of everyone. You sat there, not saying a word. If you think embarrassment is the worst thing, then you don't understand how my mom felt." Claire opened her mouth but couldn't speak. She turned away, covering her face with her hand as if trying to hold back tears. Evelyn, seizing the moment, stepped forward, her tone venomous. "You dare blame Claire? You caused this mess, Mike. You think you can get away with it? I'll sue you. I'll make sure you pay." I gave a wry smile, leaning against my desk. "Sue me? Go ahead and try. The contracts are in my name, and I have the right to stop unpaid services. I covered the deposits. The rest was your responsibility if you wanted the party to continue. But I'm guessing you couldn't, could you? I've heard the Wentworths are having financial troubles. Frozen accounts, right?" Evelyn's face paled, but she quickly regained her haughty demeanor. "You're making things up," she said, but her voice lacked its usual confidence. I knew I'd hit a nerve. Rumors about the Wentworths being investigated for tax evasion and financial fraud weren't exactly secret. I had no solid proof, but Evelyn's reaction was enough to confirm they were teetering on the edge. I turned to Claire, my tone softer but resolute. "Claire, I love you. But if you can't stand by me, can't defend my mom, I'm not sure we're on the same path anymore." Claire looked at me, her eyes brimming with tears. "Mike, that's not fair," she whispered. "I've tried to keep the peace. I didn't want to upset Mom, but I don't want to lose you either." "Then you need to choose," I said, my voice low but firm. "I can't live with someone who doesn't respect my family." The room grew stifling. Evelyn broke the silence, her tone menacing. "You'll regret this, Mike. You don't know who you're messing with." I met her gaze, unflinching. "Evelyn, I'm not afraid of you, and if you bother my mom again, I'll make sure those rumors about your family aren't just rumors." Evelyn stiffened but didn't respond. Claire took her mother's hand, pulling her toward the door. "Mom, let's go," she said, her voice weary. Before leaving, she turned back to me, her eyes full of pain. "Mike, I'll talk to you later. I need time." The door closed, leaving me in silence. I sank into my chair, feeling as if I'd just run a marathon. My heart was pounding, but not from fear. I knew I'd done the right thing, not just for my mom, but for myself. I'd let the Wentworths control me for too long, and now I'd drawn a line. I opened my laptop, starting work, but my mind kept drifting to Claire. I loved her, but love couldn't be built on silence and one-sided compromises. I thought of my mom, of the proud look in her eyes last night, and I knew I'd never let her down again. My phone buzzed with a message from my mom. "Are you okay? I'm worried about you." I smiled, replying, "I'm fine, Mom. I'll be back soon." I stood looking out the window at the bustling city of Ann Arbor, as lively as ever, but for me everything had changed. I was no longer the man trying to fit into the Wentworths' world. I was Mike Larson, Diane Larson's son, and I would live in a way that made my mom proud.